how to become a blockchain architect and become awesome at it. I'm Joe Holbrook. I'm the author of Architecting Enterprise Blockchain Solutions, and I'm really happy you're here today to learn more about becoming a blockchain architect. Let's go ahead and talk about what the course will provide you, and I'll talk about the flow, and I'll also do a brief introduction. As far as the course, we're going to talk about what exactly is a blockchain architect, why would you want to become one, what does a blockchain architect do day to day, what about the skills that are needed, what are the salary expectations, very important, right? We'll go through LinkedIn as well, and I'll talk about some of the roles that are available at the time of recording the course, and just give you some feedback on those roles and just provide you a different viewpoint, at least when you are ready to look for a new role. I'm going to go through AWS and talk about some of the features with AWS if you want to deploy a blockchain on AWS. I'll also go through a whiteboard and I'll talk about deploying a blockchain service. I'll talk about the career path, certifications that you might want to look at, training options, coaching options. I'll talk about interview techniques, and we'll go through some interview questions that are common in the world of blockchain. And then we'll close out the course. When it comes to what the course will provide, we'll go into a discussion around a whiteboard. We'll talk about some demos in AWS. I'll talk about how you get started, and also provide you a lot of links as well. There should be a download PDF of links for those that are interested. Depending on where you view the course, it may or may not be available. If it isn't available, reach out to me. I'm happy to send it to you. About me, I'm Joe Holbrook. I'm the author of Architecting Enterprise Blockchain Solutions, but I've been in IT for 25 years. I'm currently the CLO of Tech Commanders here in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, I've been working as a blockchain architect for the last about 3.5, 4 years or so. And a lot of it is more consulting and training, but what I can tell you is that there's a lot of demand, and I'm really excited that you're considering that as a career. Now, as far as certifications, I have the CBSA. I was one of the first ones to take that certification, excellent certification from the Blockchain Training Alliance. I'll talk more about certifications coming up at the end of this course, where I'll provide you insight into different ones. I'm also well known for my cloud architectures. One of the areas that I got into initially when I learned blockchain was actually deploying blockchains on AWS. And that's where I really started to learn about Hyperledger and also Corda. When it comes to other experiences, again, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I've been a CompTIA subject matter expert as well. So let's go ahead and move on and get started with the course. What is a blockchain architect? When it comes to what exactly a blockchain architect is, perhaps the simplest way to put it is that they're a data specialist. They understand data. They really get how data structures work. They understand networking. Basically, they're going to be a data specialist that is going to focus mainly on how to set up, how to architect, or even deploy a blockchain. Generally, they're highly paid blockchain professionals. We'll talk about the salaries coming up shortly. We'll also talk about what kind of roles you can expect to see them in as well. Generally, they're going to be pre-sales focused. In other words, before the architecture has been really sold to the customer, it's been designed initially, generally for a proof of concept maybe, that's going to be more pre-sales. Enterprise focus, again, they're going to know the larger picture in an enterprise. Some of the roles that commonly you'll see will overlap with a blockchain architect could be a systems manager, systems engineer, could also be an application developer, a pre-sales engineer or consultant, or even a systems or enterprise architect as well. Now, also, too, if you're already in infotech and you're performing a role and that role is technical, then great. You have a really great on-ramp to learning blockchain and becoming a blockchain architect. So if you're a solutions engineer or a systems engineer, IT engineer, a database administrator, even a developer, these are really good roles that could almost have somewhat of a lateral or vertical movement, maybe a little bit more horizontal as well. So one of those things to keep aware of is that whatever you're doing now, there could be a lot of overlap to what you would do in a blockchain architect role. What are the requirements for becoming a blockchain architect? Well, it is important to note that these roles will have very different requirements between different companies. That goes without saying. However, generally at a very high level, you should expect to have a degree. This is generally something that a lot of organizations like to see. Could be in computer science, could be in math, could be in chemistry. Usually technical is better. However, not every role will require a degree, generally the smaller companies. But if you want to work for a larger company, probably need a degree. Now, generally a blockchain architect role will vary widely, and as stated, right, it depends on if you're a small company you're working with or a large enterprise. When it comes to some of the requirements, generally these are going to be roles that are pre-sales focused or enterprise architect focused. In other words, you could be working for a buyer or vendor, or you could be working for a large enterprise and you're there to put things together based on the enterprise architectures. You're going to develop these architectures and also integrate applications as well. So there's going to be some development knowledge, API knowledge that you're going to need to have. You'll develop strategies. This could be especially around migration, compliance, security. You'll need really good whiteboarding skills, no question about it, and presentation skills as well. So with that said, let's move on to the next lesson. Why become a blockchain architect? A lot of great reasons to become one. So let's talk about some of the main reasons. First, the career growth. No question about the career demand right now. If you go to LinkedIn, there's thousands of roles listed worldwide. So with that said, there's just a lot of different opportunities. The career growth was also ranked by LinkedIn, and I believe it was CIO Magazine and a few others have ranked blockchain in the top 10 roles that enterprises require. The career salary range is also very high. We'll talk about the salary ranges coming up shortly. It is a reasonable barrier to entry, meaning that you don't need to have, for example, multiple degrees or a master's degree or anything crazy to become a blockchain architect. It's, again, really expected that you are IT focused and you have some experience that will be very helpful. Some organizations do require, for example, perhaps a bachelor's degree in a technical area such as computer science, maybe math, also too possibly electronic engineering or something of that nature. So if you have something of that nature, you're going to be just fine. It is technically challenging, meaning that you're going to have to learn a lot of new things and understand a lot of concepts and also best practices, but also how you could move a bunch of parts and put them together to make things work, right? It's about understanding how APIs work, how development programs work, understand what a smart contract is. A lot of different things go into this. Lastly, a degree is not needed with a lot of companies, as I hinted at before. Be aware, though, that some companies, especially the larger consulting firms, will generally require one. I've also seen a lot of what we call financial sector companies still require it or require as not so much a hard requirement, but it would be nice to have. They prefer someone with, for example, a master's in some cases, but generally a bachelor's is more than enough. With that said, just be aware that there's a lot of great reasons to become a blockchain architect, and these are just the main ones. I would also like to just add a couple other reasons. If you think it's something that you want to do, that's a great reason, right? If you find blockchain fun to learn, then that's even better, right? So if you enjoy doing it, that's another great reason as well. With that said, let's move on to the next lesson. What are the blockchain architect tasks? Now, it goes without saying that every role will be somewhat different, but in general, you can expect to have to plan services for deployment, work with customers around design, implementations to a degree, maybe proof of concepts. Whiteboarding is going to be one of those areas you'll likely need to get really good at, being able to design an architecture and communicate that architecture to both technical and non-technical audiences. You'll need to work typically as well on contracts, so this could be more of a pre-sales focus, I would say. Now, if you're with a VAR vendor, it'll be very different than if it's more of a basically consulting firm or even an internal engagement as well. When it comes to SLAs, generally the organizations will want some kind of SLA around support. This can be a little tricky, but I would say in general, if it's a cloud platform, they're going to be pretty straightforward. If it's a managed service, again, that can be handled any number of ways. If it's internal, again, these are things you'll want to work out with, especially the right team members, on what can be supported and how it can be supported. You'll, of course, need to validate the stakeholder requirements before you design anything or work anything out. Generally, these are pre-sales focused roles in a lot of scenarios, so be aware of that. You'll need to get really good at talking to people, understanding, listening to people, taking what is effectively requirements or basically the stakeholder idea of what the blockchain should be and translating that into a design. You'll also need to make sure that the right technologies are used and that everything will work. Now, one of the things that would definitely help here as a blockchain architect is that you do understand some of the programming and development languages, that you do understand networking, that you also do understand, again, how to listen to people and translate the requirements. That's where your success will be. With that said, let's move on to the next lesson. Top skills needed. Let's talk about the top skills that you're going to want to really have in order before you start looking for blockchain roles. And this should also really help you understand what areas of focus you'll need to really look at based on your experience on what kind of training you want to take and how you'll go about it. So the first skill is Linux. You have to have Linux in the world of blockchain, at least enterprise blockchain. Database skill is very important. The reality is that all the blockchains have data structures, and you'll need to understand, for example, everything from Merkle trees over to how things are actually maintained or how transaction logs are handled. NoSQL to be able to query in a lot of cases. So database skill is very important. Programming. Programming is something that, as a blockchain architect, you should have high-level capabilities in typically. However, I'm going to be honest, a lot of the roles sort of want someone that's an architect and a developer, as well as a front-end and a back-end developer, and then you can sell as well, right? So this is what you're going to run into with a lot of roles. They want really everybody that applies to be everything. So you'll need to really spend some time figuring out what you want to be good at. When it comes to networking, no question about it, peer-to-peer networking is very important. So if you already have client-server experience, this will really help. Security. Being able to secure the blockchain network, manage, for example, cryptography, very important. So when we consider, for example, data structures in blockchain, remember blockchains in the true world of blockchains, when it's decentralized, basically that blockchain is going to have a block written to the chain, and then the next block will be appended to it. Now, there's, of course, a lot to the data structure that you'll want to know. And then when we talk about databases, we'll need to understand as well, not only databases, but the types of consensus as well that goes with it. Now, this is directly from my book, Architecting Enterprise Blockchain Solutions. Some more graphics from my book as well. I go through, for example, how smart contracts flow. You'll want to know about smart contracts. Also, too, the development stack is really important to understand. For example, does the API work at layer 1, layer 2, layer 3? These are things you want to know. What about, for example, a smart contract? What layer would that be? Now, continue on with some more skills. DevOps is very important. Containers, very important. You'll need to know, at a minimum, Docker containers, if not Kubernetes as well. So you'll need to look at, for example, how a container is deployed and how they're managed. Because when you deploy a lot of these blockchains, you're deploying containers. Now, virtualization. You really need to know how to run a virtual machine, especially if it's in the cloud. Now, we can deploy a blockchain on a VM, or it could be on a container. But it's also important to realize that sometimes when we deploy services on-prem or in the cloud, that we may deploy, for example, virtual machines, but that Kubernetes cluster is actually running on VMs. So we need to just have that, what I call 360 view of the ecosystem when it comes to virtualization. Blockchain as a service, certainly knowing AWS is going to help. As far as APIs, no question about APIs, right? We need to be able to understand why they're important, how they work. Also understand, too, at least from a management perspective, how they're going to be integrated. Some other great skills to have, not always what I would call the main requirements. At least you'll look at the job postings. But if you are a blockchain architect and you're able to develop smart contracts and chain code, that will certainly add to your net worth, more than likely. And then as far as knowing high-level programming languages, generally I always tell people you can't be really an expert in everything per se. When it comes to the programming languages, it's just not something that's viable. Even developers, they like to focus on 2 or 3 and call it a day. They don't want to know 7 or 8. Cryptocurrencies and mining. Now, because of the fact that if you're going to be working for enterprise architecture, you're probably not going to integrate cryptocurrencies, but you may need to set up oracles. Oracles are going to be integrations into off-chain services. Could be to bring in a stock ticker, could be for a cryptocurrency exchange like Coinbase, whatever it is, having that experience can help. Public key encryption. Pretty much every major blockchain uses PKE in some form or another, so knowing that is so important. Okay, now some more graphics coming up I'm just going to talk about briefly. Just, again, this is not to make you an expert, but to give you ideas on maybe where you want to go, what you need to learn. Okay, so when we get to the development layers, right, with Ethereum, we'll want to know the different layers like the smart contract layer, the bytecode layer, and the EVM layer. We'll also want to know some of the services, applications available in Ethereum or for Ethereum. Truffle, Ganache, Drizzle, very popular suite of solutions. Wallets, very important to learn as well. And then when it comes to Hyperledger Fabric, understanding development, these are very important as well. Being able to understand networking and how all this works. Comparing different blockchains, very, very important to talk intelligently about the differences between each blockchain. Pre-sales focused blockchain experts should be able to easily rattle off differences between Ethereum, Corda, Quorum, Hyperledger, and even Ripple, and a lot of the others, like Solana, for example. Comparing enterprise blockchains as well, being able to not only understand the blockchain features and architecture, but also development. So being able to compare how you develop smart contracts over here versus over there. Lastly, and perhaps even more importantly than ever, being able to understand client-server to decentralization, being able to understand where Web 2 is and where Web 3 is going, being able to talk intelligently about that is so important. Let's move on to the next lesson. What is the salary range? So when it comes to salary, this is a wide open net, no question about it. It just depends on where you're located, what your skill sets are, how you sell yourself. Now, when we look at different sites, and this is true even with my experience from what I have seen, generally it could be about $150,000 per year for someone that has 2 years experience. Entry-level positions can be about 110 to 120, maybe 130. So when we look at talent.com, they had it about 126 for a new blockchain architect. When we go over and we look at ZipRecruiter or Glassdoor, you'll see the salary ranges are going to be very different. When we look at a blockchain developer, as an example, just to show you, that range could be 100,000 to 200,000 a year. I have seen developers up to 300,000. Generally, for those roles, you're going to be in New York City or you're going to be somewhere in Toronto to get a salary like that, first of all. Or secondly, you'll need to have what is really considered high-end cryptocurrency experience with an exchange or financial institution. That's what they really want to see. So if you have that experience, that adds like a bonus. If we look at a blockchain architect on Glassdoor, that's about 127,000. That seems to be about the mid-range, I guess, is where it's putting it at Glassdoor. From my experience, it's fairly straightforward with experience to get 170,000 without much of an effort for a remote role in the U.S. right now. But it really, again, just depends on who you are, where you're at, what you bring to the table, right? With that said, let's move on to the next lesson. LinkedIn Blockchain Architect Role Review. Let's go over to LinkedIn and take a look at the current jobs available for blockchain architects. We're here at LinkedIn, and I just did a quick search for blockchain architect in the U.S., and then I wanted to sort out by experience level. Now, I selected associate and mid to senior. You could also select entry level. That'll increase the number of jobs as well. But to make things a little bit easier, let's just sort out the associate level. That's generally about 2 years of experience and longer, up until usually associate should be anywhere from 2 years to about 4 years experience, or 5 years in a lot of cases. Then after 5 years, you're going to be more mid-career, if anything. Okay, so let's just talk about 2 or 3 roles, and I just want to give you some insight, things to look forward to as a potential blockchain architect, things to prepare for in the interview. The one thing I did need to say is that when you're looking at this, it'll likely be very different than when I'm doing this right now. I'm over here at LinkedIn, and I wanted to walk through, let's say, 3 roles just to give you some insight into the different roles that are available at the time of writing the course. Now, when you're taking a look at LinkedIn for jobs, you're going to, of course, have very different options. And a lot of it could be depending on where you're located, the type of role, the experience level. I'm going to look for associate and mid to senior in this case. Now, when I select, for example, entry level, it'll show about 30,000 jobs. Now, be aware that when I select this, this is basically the results already, and you'll see that some of the titles are very clear. They want a blockchain solution architect. On the other hand, some of these are a little bit what I would call off. This one here is a senior storage engineer. However, this came up because of the fact that they had blockchain located somewhere in their description. Now, another thing to recommend that you look for is to always sort out the jobs, usually within the past week or 24 hours. If you look at like any time or past month, there's so much what I would call extraneous waste available in the job market right now because of the multiple postings that companies seem to do lately. And then on top of that, they have a tendency to leave the role open when it's actually closed. This is something that's pretty well known that they still do. It is what it is. So I'm going to look at the past week, and what I want to do is really sort out the newest jobs. So when I look over here for Enterprise Architect, this is 2 applicants have applied, and they're looking for someone that is really more of a cloud person. However, they do want someone that has some knowledge in blockchain. Now this is with Coinbase, and even though the role says Senior Blockchain Security Engineer, they want someone that is able to not only manage blockchains, but also be able to design security. When I scroll down here to the, let's say there was a good one that I saw earlier, and it is over, okay, let me do this. I think I might have sorted out a little bit too much, but this one was a past month, I think. And yeah, okay, so right here. So for example, this was posted a week ago. Somehow it just didn't show up. And this is actually a really good role. And they want someone that has 7 years experience in development. They want someone that can use DevOps, but this one here is security clearance related. But they want someone that is certified in blockchain and can mentor other blockchain folks. They want platforms like Hyperledger Fabric and Ethereum as well. So that's a really good role, very descriptive. And the salary range on that is up to $175, at least that's estimated. Now, since this is a DoD-based company, Department of Defense, their roles generally are not going to pay as high as the commercial sector, from my experience being in the sector for quite a while. Okay, now this one here is a senior blockchain engineer. This is an architect type of role, and it looks like, I don't know, it looks like they might have just took it offline. But as you see here, they're just looking for someone that can deal with smart contracts and look at metadata. This is Solidity based, and they want experience in Java, C++. That's your Ethereum based ecosystem basically. Over here, this is an Azure cloud engineer, and they want someone that can at least understand blockchain. So what I'm pointing out here is that you're going to find a lot of roles, for example, that have blockchain in it. So you're going to want to really sort out this a little bit deeper because of the fact that LinkedIn picks up everything unless if you really go into the filters and try to sort it out as much as it can. Look at, for example, the salary range if it's available, benefits. Try to do that. Also, too, I would recommend remote as well, and that'll sort out the jobs quite a bit as well. So this is a blockchain infrastructure engineer. This one here, they are looking for, interestingly, Grafana. Interesting, okay. And that's more of a monitoring type tool that's more DevOps focused, development focused. Okay, and then over here is the same roles we looked at. So right now there isn't a whole lot per se. This one here is actually trying to drive you over to another network. It's called Gigster. Again, I'm not a fan of applying on third-party networks from my experience. It's more of an information gathering, if anything, but this looks like it could be a good role if it's actually an actual role. Once again, you need to, apply to this network. It's sort of like going through TopDole, where you need to get screened, and then, they'll work with you if you're matched. If you're not a direct match, they just leave you alone and forget about you. It's generally how they work at a lot of these third-party sites. Okay, so that's all that I had right now. So let's move on. In this demo, I'm going to do a short discussion about AWS's blockchain as a service to give you an idea of how it works and what you can do with it to get some practice deploying blockchains. Let's go to the demo. AWS has both a template service and a blockchain as a service as well. The main difference is that templates are really meant for you to deploy and customize on top of the AWS infrastructure, and you manage pretty much everything, whereas the managed service is going to handle the nodes for you, and then you're going to handle mainly the application integration. So it's really a difference between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So let's now go ahead and talk about the blockchain templates first. Then after we're done, we'll go talk about the blockchain as a service. Now, for those that really want to deep dive into this, I put together courses on how to do the templates, how to set up the managed blockchain service. That is called my AWS Blockchain as a Service course. It's available on Tech Commanders. Now, for those that would like to just have a brief overview, this is what we're going to provide you here in this course. So when we consider a blockchain as a service, we want to be able to deploy a blockchain infrastructure as quickly and efficiently as possible, because we don't want to use resources that are on-prem or we don't have access to them, whatever that situation is. Now, with AWS template service, you're going to first choose, are we going to deploy Ethereum or are we going to deploy Hyperledger? After we do that, we then need to determine, for example, what exactly is going to be the number of nodes we need, what is the configuration going to be, the membership, and all that. Once we do that, we would then need to go through a whole process on AWS to configure the templates. That is going to include security groups. That is also going to include as well setting up security. Now, security groups in AWS, if you're not familiar with them, are really firewalls for the virtual machine and the VPC. We also set up the sandbox, which is the virtual private cloud. Now, on the screen is really the template that we would use in CloudFormation, which is an infrastructure as code solution for AWS. Once we configure the template, we would then deploy that template, and if it's successful, it'll let you know it's creating, and then it'll complete. Then you'll see Hyperledger Fabric actually be deployed, and that'll be viewable in the Blockchain Explorer called Hyperledger Explorer. So that really is the process at a high level on how this would all work. Now, on this screen is the Hyperledger Explorer, and you can see in the Explorer that it shows the blocks, the number of transactions, the nodes that are in the network, activity. There's also a peer graph down at the bottom left area that shows basically the structure of the blockchain network. And there's certainly a lot more we could talk about in the Explorer itself, even when we deploy an initial config. For example, you could certainly look at the transaction logs, you look at the node status, and all this fun stuff. But for the purposes of this course, we're going to go ahead and move on and talk about the blockchain as a service, which is the managed platform. We have the AWS blockchain as a service, and this service is a platform as a service. It allows you to deploy an Ethereum node, which is a public network, or attach that node to the public network, which is Ethereum. And then you have the ability to deploy a private network, which would be Hyperledger Fabric. Now, there's really 4 steps to deploying in the blockchain as a service. You select the framework, you invite members, you would then select the nodes, and then deploy the apps. Now, there's also some work that has to be done. Generally, you want to invite other members to the network, so you're going to need multiple AWS accounts to be able to use this with Hyperledger Fabric, for example. But with that said, there's a lot more that goes into this. For the purpose of this course, we're going to go ahead and move on. I just wanted to provide you a short little demonstration of some of the options for blockchains in the world of cloud so that you have an idea of what you can do. Whiteboard discussion. Let's go over to the whiteboard and talk about some potential solutions around Hyperledger. One area that you'll want to be really proficient in is whiteboarding. When it comes to understanding customer requirements and to be able to translate those requirements into a visual solution for the customer will not only help the customer but help you effectively put together the right solution. What I'd like to do now is do a short and sweet discussion about a challenge that the customer has, and then talk about the solution. And once again, just be aware, this is short and sweet. I'm not here to provide a 1-hour course on blockchain architecture or 10 hours. So I just want to make it brief and short to give you some ideas of what you may be doing every day as a blockchain architect. All right, so the scenario is we have a customer. That customer is part of a consortium. That consortium ships stuff basically all over the world. And one of the challenges that they have is that they would like to have separate business units actually assigned to specific communication channels. Now, in the world of Hyperledger Fabric, we have what's called a channel. So a channel is actually a way that we could segment our traffic and also segment the blockchain as well. This provides privacy and also will provide the customer a point-to-point communication that is really more approached by an architecture principle called sandboxing. So what we're doing here is we're really taking what is similar in the world of networking as a VLAN or a vSAN and just basically allowing the customer to communicate between the required parties. And on the blockchain, though, we could have multiple customers. Let's say we have 14 customers in this Hyperledger Fabric deployment, not a large one, a small one, but this is a shipping conglomerate, and what they want to do is make sure that the partners in, let's say, Asia have their own channel, just like the ones in America or Europe. And we need to do this for multiple reasons. It could be for compliance, could also be for security, could also be just because that's the easiest way to do it. Whatever the factor is, that's really important to consider. Now, in this case here, let's say we have this shipping company, and they're part of Org 2. And Org 2 here wants to have a transaction between org 4. We don't want org 3 or org 1 to be able to participate or see the ledger as well in this specific blockchain deployment with Hyperledger Fabric. So the easiest way to segment the traffic to mitigate any concerns is to create what's called a channel. Now, with that said, that's all that I really had for this discussion. Please definitely consider looking at other courses if you want more of a deep dive in blockchain architecture. My book goes into a lot of this in detail, and also to check out my website as well for more courses around that. Let's move on to the next lesson. Career path options. Now, how do you actually get into blockchain? It's a really good question, and I'm going to be honest, the road is different for pretty much everyone. There isn't really any solid kind of what I would call university degree programs yet, nor is there really any kind of schooling that has really been designed specifically for long-term training in blockchain. We do have boot camps, of course, that last a month or two, but in general, you don't go to a college just to take blockchain, right? It's going to be typically a subset of computer science or information systems generally, and this is still very few colleges that have a catered program like that. Now, as far as a career path, I'd recommend that you really consider taking a boot camp if you're really new to IT in general. And the reason is because there's just too many things to learn that may not make sense to you if you don't understand protocols around encryption or protocols with networking or what an API is. So this is where you're going to need to figure out what you're willing to do, how much you're willing to invest, and also where you want to go, how fast. So there's a lot of things there. Now, for me, I got into blockchain because I was already in IT and I was doing cloud computing, and I had some customers talk about deploying blockchains. So that's how I learned blockchain. I deployed them on AWS and Google as well as Azure. So this is where my specialty is deploying Hyperledger Fabric, for example, on AWS. So with that said, just be aware your route to a blockchain career will be very different than mine or someone else's. So look at where you are in life, and that should really give you an idea of where you need to start. So I'd recommend taking a boot camp if you can't afford it. If you can't afford it, then you need to look at taking courses online that are low cost or free. Consider an internship. Now, I have seen, especially in New York, quite a bit of internships if you're in a college in that area. So you can definitely consider an internship, especially for a financial institution. You generally see some blockchain-related ones or fintech to a degree as well. But with that said, they're still hard to come by. Get certifications. No question that's going to help you add those keywords to your profile. And also provide that prospective employer, hey, I know at least the baseline. If I can pass this CBSA, then I know that I can at least at a high level design a blockchain network. Now, it is important that you set reasonable expectations. Now, when I say reasonable, this can be very different for different people, but I'll just give you an example of where I was at, and that way you can figure out where you may want to go and how you will get there. So when I look at, for example, my knowledge 3 or 4 years ago with blockchain, it's, very different than now. And when I got started, I can tell you right now, just like anything else that you're learning new, it takes a little time that you're going to have to invest, and you'll need to keep trying stuff, right? It's about reading and trying and typing those commands. And the reality is don't expect to be a Hyperledger expert in 2 months. There's just too many things to know about it. But for me, I just practiced, and I did a little bit more every time I deployed the blockchain. Every time I configured something, I try a little bit extra just to see what would happen. So it's all about how much you want to learn, drive basically. When I say drive, what I mean is type those commands and see how it handles, right? Also, too, you'll need to spend money learning a course, and that could be a few months, and that could be hundreds of dollars to thousands depending on where you want to go. Again, it's what you have and what you can do and what you're willing to do. But definitely keep learning from courses. There's a lot of great short courses, and there's a lot of long ones as well. So whatever that requirement is in your mind, where you want to get to, you'll need to determine, I have $2,000 available that I want to invest in learning more. Then you'll need to figure out, do I go to a boot camp? Maybe I can't afford a boot camp, but I can afford a week course or 2-week course and then get certified, right? It's about what you want to, spend, right? And what you have. Okay. And that sort of turns into the coaching, right? If you really want to get prepared, get a coach, right? Even if it's, $200 or $300 for 1 or 2 sessions, that coach can make the difference of you being ready for that interview or not being ready. That's the thing, is if that job is important enough for you to get, you're going to invest some time to prepare for it. Those interviews are going to be critical for you. There's a lot of blockchain talent out there already, and you're going to be competing against them in a lot of cases. So you want to set goals and be reasonable with those goals, in a nutshell, right? Don't expect to be a Corda guru in 2 weeks. It's just not going to happen. Maybe 2 years, sure, it'll likely happen. So with that said, let's move on. It goes without saying that getting a certification can certainly help you at least provide your potential employer some kind of assurance that you have a baseline of knowledge. It can also provide you confidence as well. Now, certifications are generally inexpensive compared to a 3-day course or even a 5-day course in a lot of cases. So it is a great way for you to have a baseline going into an interview or applying for a job for that matter. Certifications are digital, and this provides, again, you the opportunity to have your badges displayed on LinkedIn or your certificate as well. That provides your potential employer a reference to validate that you're certified as well, easily, without them having to spend a lot of time. Now, what are some certifications you can consider? I would consider the Certified Blockchain Solutions Architect by the Blockchain Training Alliance. That's really the de facto standard right now. It's been around for years. I'm certified in that area. I've taken the first exams that they had, and I can tell you right now that they're well written. And again, you have to go to the exam center to take it, and it is on the blockchain as well. It's easily validated. Now, there's also certifications that are from one-on-one blockchains. These you do not have to go to a certification vendor or a certification proctor, I guess is the term I should use. So no need to go to Pearson, for example, or PSI or whatever. You can take these online, and again, you just pay for the course, and then after you pass all the requirements for going through the course, you then can take the exam, and then you'll get your certification. That's from one-on-one blockchains. If you want to get a little bit more technical and more developer-focused, the ones I would recommend would be from either BTA or from Corda. Now, also, one thing to bring out about Corda is that they do have a newer certification. I've not taken it. It is a non-technical certification, and that's a great certification for you to take, especially if you just want to know the fundamentals of Corda. So with that said, consider getting certified. A lot of great options. If you want some additional advice on other certs that you see out there, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to provide advice to you on the certifying body. With that said, let's move on to the next lesson. Training options. Now, there's any number of ways for you to get enabled in blockchain. There's free and paid options, as you would expect, but be aware that sometimes the quality can vary widely. So depending on what you want to learn and how fast you want to learn it, you'll need to look at what you have available for resources and what you're willing to pay. So be aware that blockchain boot camps can cost between $4,000 and $6,000, and I've seen some higher than that. For example, I do teach the Simply Learn Blockchain Bootcamp. That was, I think, running about $7,000, but that was a little bit more extensive than some of the others. So it really just depends. But on average, I've seen them about $5,000 or $6,000 typically. As far as coaching, you can hire a coach to help get you through, especially preparing for an interview. That would be highly recommended for you to do. Meetups have some great resources available. For example, I host the Jacksonville blockchain and crypto boot camps here in town. I run them occasionally as well, free, at least a few sessions. So you can check that out on meetup.com. When it comes to seminars and events, there's, of course, free events and paid events. You'll need to figure out what's going to work for you when it comes to these events. And is it worth you traveling for them, or is it a Zoom call, right? It's all about what you want for results. So in a nutshell, consider looking at training courses or look at blockchain boot camps. Coaching, meetups are great. And there's a ton of different sites out there as well for you to get enabled in blockchain. Coaching options. One of the best ways to invest in yourself preparing for a new possible role, for a new career, is to get a coach. A coach is really a best practice, and we typically see the more successful people choose coaching as a way to prepare, especially if they're in a new career. When it comes to coaching, the goal is to help you get enabled faster, to provide feedback, to provide areas of improvement, to really give you some practice as well, especially if it's a mock interview. So definitely consider coaching. It's really investment in you. Now, the cost of coaching is typically between $100 and $200 an hour for a blockchain or a technical coach in IT. Generally, that's about what you're going to see most of the time. They generally provide you feedback. It's a one-on-one experience. It's not group coaching where you have to share the time with 3, 5, 10 other people, which is what we do in a boot camp generally. And it also provides experience from the coach to you to really make your life easier, to get feedback quicker. And it's really about you. That's really why you want coaching. With that said, let's move on to the next lesson. Interview techniques. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the best practices you really need to consider when you're ready to start interviewing. So when we consider interviewing, it's important to realize that if we're going to interview for a new type of role, a new job that we haven't performed before, this, of course, will be the hardest scenario. Because not only do we need to understand what the role is really about, but we need to understand, for example, what would be some of the types of questions we'll get, what are the expectations of companies. One thing to be aware of, too, is that we have confidence we need to build. So sometimes when we're in something new, we're practicing something new, there's that confidence level that we need to achieve for us to do really well in an interview. A lot of times you go into an interview and you actually know what you really need to know about the job and the technical aspects of it, but sometimes you just get nervous and it's really hard to communicate properly. Interviewing is about communicating in most scenarios. It's not about you reciting an exam question or anything like that. It's about trying to relay trust to the interviewer or interviewers. So it really depends on who you're talking to and what are their expectations, what are they looking for. So your first interview is always probably going to be the hardest. The second interview, you should have that confidence building up. Then the third, you really need to feel confident in your skills. So once again, if you've learned blockchain, you haven't done a role around blockchain, again, it's going to take a little time for you to be confident. It's normal, right? Nothing there that probably is new to you. So just be aware that it's okay and you will build your confidence. However, one thing to really be aware of here is that when we're considering, for example, what we're interviewing in and where we're located, this can vary quite a bit. So if you're in Jacksonville, Florida, enterprise blockchain really isn't here. On the other hand, if you want to talk fintech or you work in crypto, there's a lot of opportunities. So it really depends on what you want to do. Now, once again, know your market. If you're in New York City versus Dayton, Ohio, you'll probably have very different opportunities. Now, it's important to realize a lot of roles are either hybrid or remote. So that can definitely add to your potential market that you could submit resumes to look for work. When it comes to interviewing, again, there's some common sense techniques here as well to be aware of. As one who does a lot of interviews for companies and helping them sort out the right candidate, I can tell you right now, you'll be surprised how many people are not able to show up on time, even for a Zoom call. Behavior like that, excuses like that, typically do not get you a second interview, or even maybe continuing the interview. If you do show up on site, always bring a copy of your resume and profile for the interviewer or interviewers. Also, research the company. When an organization asks you, can you tell us about our company? What do you know about our company? Don't say you don't know, right? You don't want to do that. All right, so as far as the last thing to talk about in this lesson, be very proactive on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is by far the best tool for you to find a job. Hands down, okay? I'm going to be honest. I've been doing this a long time. And one of the things that I like to do as well is I generally like to set up different aliases if I do look for work on different platforms. So I won't do this anymore, but if I did go to Dice or if I did go to Monster or Career Builder, I would set up a different alias. And I did that in the past because I wanted to figure out what platform was better over other platforms and to figure out what all this junk mail I was getting was really coming from. And I figured that out by using the alias. Now, for those folks that are military veterans, LinkedIn does offer a 1-year free subscription, at least at the time or right in the course, and you can take advantage of it. One thing to get from the screen, be aware too, you should always select open to. So if you're open to work or providing services like work and contracts, definitely enable that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next lesson. Interview questions. Let's talk about a few of these questions that I have here just to give you an idea of what you can expect, especially in the world of enterprise blockchain. Now, it's important to realize that depending on the blockchain expertise that the organization is looking for, the type of questions can vary quite widely. Now, it's also important to realize that generally when you deploy enterprise blockchains, a lot of the organizations expect you to have knowledge of cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, which is really a token, as we know, and then some others such as perhaps privacy coins like Monero. But with that said, just be aware that there's going to be expectations to know cryptocurrency, even though you'll likely never actually deploy one in an enterprise blockchain. With that said, let's talk about a few of these. When it comes to your experience, companies like to get the feel for what you have done. You need to be able to articulate, I designed a blockchain that was for a consortium organization. It had 12 companies. I deployed the nodes for Hyperledger Fabric, and then I was able to integrate other services with that blockchain. Now, again, that's really high level. You'll probably need to dig down a little bit deeper into what exactly did you do. Did you need to tie in the networking? Did you also have to set up monitoring? Did you also need to whiteboard a design beforehand? What exactly was your responsibility? Second question is really talking about Ethereum tokens. So these are our ERC tokens, meaning that they're ERC20, 721, could be the 1400 series, whatever the token types are. You'll want to understand the use case for each of them. For example, ERC20 is a fungible token. ERC721 is for NFTs. The 1400 series, they're really meant to be security tokens. The third question, what is the importance of a contract's bytecode in Ethereum? So this is going to be somewhat a little bit more detailed in a lot of cases. So this will let the interviewer know that you are technically adept at Ethereum. Then when it comes to private and public keys, understand the different platforms you worked on. Again, some of the questions will be more experience-driven. Some are generally going to be technical. Merkle trees, right? Data structure. And another question is going to be how would you approach and provide a solution, such as in Hyperledger Fabric, right? So with that said, if you want more help with the interview questions, recommend either getting a coach to help you to go through some of these in more details. Whiteboarding is also a great way to learn. Lastly, check out, of course, my site, Tech Commanders. We have a lot of good information there as well. So with that said, let's move on to the next lesson. Thank you for joining the course. I'm so excited that you were able to go through the course and hopefully pick up some really useful information to get you started on a new career. Now, I have some resources, though, I want to make sure that you're aware of. Go over to techcommanders.com. We have a ton of courses as well as cheat sheets and other things to help you get enabled. Also, myblockchainexperts.com has a wealth of information on blockchain, everything from how to deploy a blockchain to determining how to get into DeFi over to investing in blockchains. When it comes to getting certified, 101blockchains.com also has great certifications and resources for you to take advantage of. Meetup groups. So definitely consider joining meetup groups. There's a ton of great meetup groups available online to join for free, so definitely consider that. Now, for those that like to look at books, we have some books out there that I created. One is on the metaverse, another is a certified blockchain solutions architect study guide. Then, of course, we have our architecting enterprise blockchain solutions. This is really our enterprise book that I created. Now, as far as courses, I won't read them all to you, but they're here on Tech Commanders. I encourage you to check out Tech Commanders. Whether you want to learn about FinTech, DeFi, Polygon, NFTs, that's available. Lastly, for those that want to get into technology or want to prepare for a cloud career or even a blockchain career, I provide coaching that is focused on that area. So if that's of interest, consider that. With that said, thank you again for joining. Please reach out if I could be of assistance to you. And the links for contacting me are right here. Thanks again for joining. Have a great day.